Victoria Moran is my guest today. She is a living vegan legend. She has been vegan for almost 40 years. Is that right, Victoria?
41.
41 years now. And in the past summer, she was inducted in the Vegan Hall of Fame. In addition to having been, I'm quite intrigued, on Oprah twice. She published 13 books. That's a lot of books to write about spirituality, veganism, living a charmed life. That's perhaps one of my favorites, and aging with grace, but slowly. She is the leader of the Vegan Main Street Academy. It's a hot training spot for future vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. And she also continues to be involved with the Compassion Consortium, which is an interfaith spiritual initiative that centers kindness to the self and to all other beings and to the animals around us. She is currently working on a feature film called Miss Liberty. That's so cool, and I look forward to learning more about that. And putting the finishing touches to her 14th book, because why stop at 13, called Aging Like a Yogi. Victoria, I am so honored to have you visit my vegan family kitchen. I wish we could be in an actual kitchen and cooking something up together, but that will have to do for today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Well, we'll cook up some good conversation.
There you go. I love it. I can't, whenever I meet somebody who's been vegan for more than, 2 decades, I cannot not ask this question, which is, tell me what it was like to be a baby vegan in the mid-1980s.
Well, it was weird because vegetarian was weird. So I went vegetarian in 1969, started, pescatarian the year before. And I was the only vegetarian that anybody knew of in the city where I lived, Kansas City, Missouri. So at that time, long before I was vegan, just as a vegetarian, I was always being invited to go on radio shows and talk about being vegetarian because it was newsworthy and unusual. And I learned about veganism maybe 3 years after I went vegetarian, and it made perfect sense to me ethically. We don't want to take the milk that's supposed to be for the calves and all these things, but it just seemed ridiculous. It's like, it would also be very nice to be Mother Teresa, but it's not happening. And so I would try, and I'd last for a while, and I had great support from the people at the American Vegan Society. I always like to give them a shout out because they were here carrying the banner for veganism in North America before anybody else was. They founded the American Vegan Society in 1960, which is just, kind of stunning. But anyway, moving right along, it was so unusual that I didn't really get flack for it because people simply didn't understand it.
Tell me, who else was vegan then? Like, are you still in touch with people who were vegan at that time that
what an
you met
interesting
in the 80s?
Sure. Well, Freya Dinshaw, who was the co-founder with her late husband, Jay, of the American Vegan Society, and she and her daughter, Anne, are still running the society. They're doing amazing things. In Philadelphia, they have something called the American Vegan Center, right there in the historic part of Philadelphia, where there was a lot of U.S. history, Constitution Hall and the Liberty Bell and all that. And now the American Vegan Center. So I see Freya. And then there are some other people around that I've kind of lost touch with. There's a woman named Marcia Pearson who's still around. She was a model at that time and was very big on pushing the cruelty-free cosmetics, which we just didn't have access to. There were some body care lines. You could wash and brush your teeth and stuff like that. But in terms of color cosmetics, it had to be imported from Beauty Without Cruelty in the UK. So we tried to make our own, like Marcia came up with blush that you could make from Crisco and food coloring. So you can imagine it wasn't always absolutely lovely, but we were doing our best. So somebody else who is still around, who was very influential on me at that time, is Nathaniel Altman. And oh, you'd like Tim for your show, I'll bet, because he has a new book coming out that's the history of food. And it's all plant foods, but it's just where did a dragon fruit come from? So he's fascinating. He's one of the most prolific authors that I know. But when I met him in 1970, we were both in our very early 20s and doing semi-volunteer work at the Theosophical Society in America. And Nathaniel was working as a groundskeeper because whenever they got a male volunteer under 70, he was a groundskeeper. But after hours, he was working on his first book, which was actually the first book on vegetarianism to be published in North America since the 1800s. And it was a book called
Wow.
Eating for Life that came out just before Diet for a Small Planet. So Eating for Life came out in 1973. So because Nathaniel had a manual typewriter, he brought each chapter to me to type on my electric typewriter. And I'm typing, and thinking, you know what? I've written all these magazine articles. I could write a book. And always before that, it'd been like, no, Charles Dickens writes books. I don't do that. So those are some of the people that I still know. And then there
Wow.
also were, some wonderful kind of bigger people, celebrities and that. And one who passed away within the past 4 years was Dick Gregory, who was a wonderful comedian and civil rights activist and animal rights activist and a very high raw vegan, ultimately completely raw. During the Vietnam War, I remember I was in high school and I turned on the Johnny Carson show, and there was Dick Gregory saying that he was not going to eat solid food until the Vietnam War was over. Well, this was the late 60s. That war had been going on my whole life. I thought, well, he's going to die. But he had this amazing naturopath in Chicago, Alvinia Fulton, and she had all these nutrient powders and things he could put in his juice. So he didn't eat solid food, but he had kind of supplemented juices. And he did just what he said. He was on that regimen for close to 3 years, I believe. And so, and we've lost him now, but it was, we had our inspirers. There was an amazing event that happened in 1975 in Orono, Maine, which was the International Vegetarian Congress, which was the International Vegetarian Unions. Every other year, they do a conference somewhere in the world. And we worked really hard to get it in the States. And everybody who was anybody at that time came. So Paul Obis, the founder of Vegetarian Times, was there. At that time, Vegetarian Times was tiny, but it would ultimately become a very large publication and very influential. Helen and Scott Nearing, they were already, well, he was in his 90s, and they had written a very popular book called Living the Good Life. They had gone off the grid and homesteaded, and they were vegan. Frank and Rosalie Hurd, an Adventist couple who had one of the two vegan cookbooks that existed at that time, 10 Talents, were there. So, I have just wonderful memories and a lot of gratitude for being in on the ground floor.
The early influencers of the vegan movement in North America, and I'm so grateful for that, because we tend to think that vegans started last year sometimes, and it is so rooting to think of these deep connections. And I mean, it's not that deep, it's only 50 or 60 years, but still, anyway, it fills my heart. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Well, I love the history, and I know the history in the UK, of course, goes back further. And when I researched my first book, Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, I went to England in 1981, England, Scotland, Ireland, and met these amazing people, some of whom had been around in the 40s. And before I will stop indulging myself in historic conversation, but I do want to tell you one quote. I asked a woman named Kathleen Janaway, who was at that time General Secretary of the Vegan Society, what it was like in the early days in the 40s. And she said, We didn't know if our bones would disintegrate or if we would perish in a fortnight. We did this out of pure, disinterested compassion. And I've always held on to that.
Thank you. Whoa. That's thank you for sharing that. I really, really appreciate the history. I think we could have a whole show. We should have a panel about the history of veganism in North America. I think that would be super fun.
That would be fun. They're actually having in Maine, in Portland, Maine, as we record. I don't quite know when this will air, but they're having a whole exhibit at a museum, the history of vegetarianism, veganism in Maine. You know, that's one not very populated state.
Focus.
But there's a reporter there at the newspaper in Portland, Avery Yale Camilla, who has gotten very interested in vegetarianism in Maine and in colonial America. And I thought I kept up with this topic, but she has come up with these fascinating people. There was a French priest who was sent over to get the native people to convert, but instead he was so intrigued with their lifestyles and their spirituality that he learned from them, and he actually fought with them when the settlers were trying to run them out, and he was killed. So just amazing people. And we're in, I think what is so fascinating about this to me is that each of us as vegans, we're in this lineage. And hopefully we will not be killed in a righteous battle. But whatever our stories do turn out to be, they're going to be the stories that go on as the world wakes up to the fact that we just have to be kind. It's not that big a deal.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yes, why don't we just get on to it already, you know? One thing I appreciate about your books is that they're not all about cooking, because when people talk about vegan books, there's always this idea that it's going to be a recipe book, and you and I know that there is more to it. And in fact, you've told me before that actually the kitchen was not your happiest place, at least kind of these days, yet you still cook.
Yeah.
How do you manage?
Well, I think it's a cyclic kind of thing. There have been times in my life when I absolutely love cooking. I've never been an intuitive kind of kitchen person. I remember taking a raw food preparation class at a restaurant downtown and opening the refrigerator door and seeing that we were missing 2 items from the recipe, where the more creative people were like, oh, we'll do this and this. And I could see that maybe a gift that I have for words as a writer and a speaker, they have for food. And so I would never claim to be gifted in that way, but I do love produce. I love what it looks like and what it smells like. And I do find an interesting little kind of mental health quirk that I'll bet is not mine alone, that I can really judge where I am emotionally, spiritually, by what I want to do with food. Because when I'm exhausted, when I'm not taking good care of myself, and I look at lettuce, I say there's nothing in here to eat, because something that I have to wash and chop and deal with is nothing when I'm not committed to taking care of myself. And on other days when, everything's coming up roses and romaine, then it's a very different kind of relationship with the food. I'm also at this point in my life allowing myself not to feel that I have to be Susie Homemaker. And one of the things, that my husband has been ill, and he had a stroke in June, and he's left with aphasia, which is a difficulty with language. It's a very difficult situation, although he is making progress, lots of speech therapy. But with him in the situation that he's in, I was in this time in my life when breakfast is easy, but those other two meals, it was like, okay, I just cleaned up from lunch and now I have to make dinner. And that was really starting to weigh on me. And so I broke down and started getting some meals from one of these delivery services. And I know that they're not as fresh as if I had chopped everything and made it right that minute. And I know that they probably use more salt or oil than I would use. But since we've been doing that, everything is better, including cooking, because the fact that it's not this awful chore brings back some of the stuff that's fun about it. And what I see with these meals are things like, well, this was fine, but I would have done it this way, or I'm going to add this to it. And it just makes it better. So sometimes getting a little help is what we need to do.
So important. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that. Getting assistance and knowing where your energy levels are at any given time, right? So I'm glad this is working out. And I'm sure New York City, you have your pick of options, which is not the same maybe in the back of Nebraska, for example. Though I might be surprised. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk about your 14th book because first of all,
thank you.
I love how prolific you are and how you continue to write. And it is called Aging Like a Yogi, will be published in just a few months, early 2025. Tell me about it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have done yoga since I was 17 years old. I discovered 3 yoga books in the Kansas City, Missouri library back when you had to discover them. And yoga at that time was kind of like Bitcoin now. Everybody has heard of it, but nobody knows what it is. So there was kind of this thing, there's this yoga and then there's this yogurt. And I don't know which is which, but they're weird and they're foreign and you probably should stay away. So of course, what could be more fascinating than that? And I was very interested at the time that 2 of those 3 books were about yoga and aging. One was called Forever Young, Forever Healthy by Indra Devi, who was this fabulous Russian woman who had the most incredible life. And she was very instrumental in bringing Hatha yoga, the asana part of yoga that we think of so much today, to the States, although she had the spiritual part too, but she's really known for bringing the physical back in the 1940s. And then there was another book called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation by Jess Stern. And of course, I was 17. I never thought I would have to worry about age. I mean, good heavens. And yet I read all those books over and over and over again. They made me vegetarian because they all said, if you're going to be serious about yoga, you can't eat animals. And of course, the kind of vegetarianism that yoga has always espoused is, of course, no fish and no eggs. So the dairy is there, and that's an issue. But it was a lot closer to vegan than anything I was doing in Kansas City at that time. So, so Age Like a Yogi was inspired in 2020 when, even though I had been doing yoga for 50 years, after I discovered those books, I moved to London the following year, found my yoga teacher, Stella Churfus, and started taking yoga. And that was such an aha for me because I was overweight. I was a compulsive eater. I didn't feel good about myself, and I hated exercise. Anything in the ballpark of exercise, keep it away. But here was a way to move and bring my soul. Or, as I've come to understand, here is a way to cultivate your soul without ignoring your body. So all that had been percolating for many years. I never done yoga teacher training because in those days they didn't even have it when the teacher would tell a student when they were ready. But during the pandemic, I did take a yoga teacher training on Zoom, and that really got me thinking about all the yoga and all the other kind of spiritual stuff. Yoga's kind of been at the middle, but I mean, I've explored every kind of spirituality there is. My degree is in comparative religions because I just find meaning making really cool. So I was thinking about, I really have used these yogic ideas spiritually. And then also what I came upon more recently, Ayurveda, yoga's sister science, just to feel better and approach these later decades with, I think, greater vitality and hopefully greater health. So that was when I started working on this book. And, books can be long time coming. So, yeah. So by the time it comes out in 2025, it will have had a 4 to 5 year thought history, but I'm really
Incubation.
excited about it. Yeah. Yeah.
So is it a how-to book?
Yes. Yes. That's what I write. I'm a how-to writer and I'm proud of it. I have always said that one of my goals in life is to make self-help literature too. So I love words and I love getting the perfect phrase and all that stuff. And I hope that what I write is very readable and that it reads like you're having a conversation with a really good friend. It's 40 little chapters. I've kind of done well with 40 little chapters. My book, Main Street Vegan, is like that. And this one is in 10 sections so that we can really look at different aspects of this whole thing, like what's physical and what's spiritual and yoga and Ayurveda. And they're generally right in step with each other. Sometimes they're a little bit different. And the coolest thing for me to discover on the Ayurvedic side is that they really do have a great big old secret to youthfulness. And that is to understand that everybody has a dosha. Probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with that. If you're not, you can just go to Deepak Chopra's website and take a dosha quiz, and it'll tell you your body type, vata, pitta, or kapha. And that's your same body type your whole life. And it's absolutely perfect. What you need to do is live in such a way that your amount of vata, pitta, and kapha stay very close to where they were at that point of conception, because that's what's balanced for you. It's really this idea of being at home with yourself. So your dosha makeup is absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But what happens is when we're children, we're all very influenced by kapha dosha, whether that's our own prominent dosha or not. And that means, we're all plump and we're all cute and we don't get very sick except for, maybe sniffles, ear infection, that kind of thing. And we're probably round and plump and cuddly. And as that kind of wears off and we come into pitta, which is prime of life, and that's when we're getting everything done and we're getting our education finished up and we're getting our career and our home and our mates and our family, all that stuff. And then later, and it's kind of different depending on who you talk to, but somewhere 55, somewhere in that kind of 50s decade, we start moving more into vata. So regardless of what your own personal dosha makeup is, as you get older, vata things start happening. So this means drier skin, hair, eyes. Your nails get more brittle. Your bones get more brittle. Your joints may start creaking and feeling dry for the first time. Your cast iron stomach is no longer made of cast iron, or maybe it's rusting out and you start to feel kind of IBS sort of stuff, or indigestion or constipation. And then of course there's thinning hair. There's all the stuff that we think of, oh, that's just old. No, that's not old, that's vata. And there are ways to counteract vata, and there's sweet, sweet ways, which is one of the things I love so much about Ayurveda, because so much in the health world, and I've been around, all parts of the health world, It's tough. It's like, go, just drink lemon water for a week or, things like that. Whether it's good or bad, it's hard. And Ayurveda, especially things that balance vata, it's very sweet. So it tells you have soup or stew or hot cereal or juicy fruit. Wrap yourself up in a comforter on the couch. Just be really sweet to yourself. Give yourself a beautiful massage with warm oil. And then just go meditate for 20 minutes and let it sink in. And then clean your feet off really well so you won't trip, and take a wonderful, luxurious shower. So, all these ideas are just so nurturing, and they also bring down vata and slow the aging process.
I look forward to aging with your book. It sounds like a great proposal.
Thank
I
you.
want to connect the two a little more tightly, the yoga and veganism.
Yes.
I would so love to believe that, um, seeing how important the concept of ahimsa is, for example, in the yoga, maybe in the more spiritual part of yoga. But anyway, so many, bottom line, so many people in the United States and Canada and the world who are very passionate about yoga are certainly not vegan and not even vegetarian in many
Yeah.
cases.
Yes.
What the heck?
Well, I think, you could look at probably any religion and look at the founder and look at what they stood for and what they said. And then you look at how it's commonly practiced, and it would be like, huh? What's that? And I think what's happened with yoga, there's always an upside and a downside here on Earth. That's the interesting thing, we're the yin yang plane of existence. So it's wonderful that yoga came from India and is now everywhere for so many people to benefit. But things get lost in translation. And vegetarianism, and that kind of vegetarianism that other than dairy was, really vegetarian, was always part of yoga. One of the cool things about yoga is that those early teachers, the rishis, were looking for a kind of diet that would make people be able to sit for long periods in meditation. So the kind of diet that wouldn't make you fall asleep, but that also wouldn't stimulate the heck out of you. And you'd be in this beautiful place they call sattvic, this beautiful place of balance. And so food wise, they determined 4,000 years ago that would be fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Now, they also included, quote, milk from healthy cows. And I would say, I don't know how many healthy cows there are around, and I certainly don't know where you're going to get karma-free milk. It's just not practical, workable. It's tough. So I think yoga is very vegan, and many yogis have come to this. It's really interesting, some of the stories. There are Anna Forrest, a very popular contemporary yogini, and at one time she was pretty much paleo, and I think she actually hunted, and then she had an aha and is now vegan. And we have, of course, Sharon Gannon, that I'm very proud to say wrote the foreword to Age Like a Yogi. And she and her husband, David Life, founded Jiva Mukti, which has always had veganism as a core principle. I think that what has happened with Western yoga is a little bit what's happened with some of the churches as well. In trying to keep up with the secular world, they've kind of loosened up on certain things. And what's happened in the loosening is that in most cases, instead of drawing more people, people have left. And if you look out there in the church world, the churches that have some more parameters, like you need to do this, you need to show up here, you need to not do that. If you do this, you're out. they're the ones that are growing and getting so big. So I think people do kind of feel this need for some kind of rules. And the cool thing about the rules in yoga is that they're not for anybody else's benefit. They are for your own body, mind, and soul. And when you get a hold on these yamas and niyamas, the moral teachings and the personal disciplines, your whole life turns around. And ahimsa is the first one. So I think we just need to go out there and shine our light. And I always, whether it's a yogic context or another context, I just assume that everybody's vegan. And if not, they're pre-vegan. You know, the idea that I would say you don't mind going to a vegetarian restaurant, do you? I would never ask if anybody minded. I'd just say, this is a great place. Let's go here. And I think we need to do that in yoga. And the other interesting thing in yoga is that at the end of so many classes, there's a prayer in Sanskrit. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. And what I have been told by Sanskrit scholars is that the direct translation is only the very first part of the English translation, which is may all beings be free from suffering. But we usually translate it in yoga as may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings know peace and joy. May the thoughts, words, actions, and choices of my day contribute to that freedom and that happiness for all. And you know, everybody, they're there in their Lululemons and they're all, you know, look, oh, some, and then they go have chicken salad. So there's a disconnect. And I find that a wonderful challenge for me right now is to try to reach people who ought to be low-hanging fruit for veganism and who aren't. So certainly yogis are one of those. And I think that some of the more eclectically spiritual people, you would think, but instead they're telling, you know, they just pray for the soul of the animal and then, you know, they eat it. And I think veganism is a very, very young movement. And yet older people have such a vested interest in looking into it because of the health benefits. So hopefully if I can get some yogis and some over 50s, I'll be doing my job.
Yes, amen to that. And I want to bring up the fact that you are also aging. And I was going to say, I had prepared myself to say you don't look protein deficient, which you obviously aren't. But I want to emphasize how intellectually vibrant you are. And, you know, we were just talking about writing your 14th book. Can I ask, how old are you, Victoria?
I'm 74.
You are 74 years old. So what are, because I think I mentioned to you in the fall, I'm teaching this new program in person. I haven't taught in person in such a long time called
Ooh.
Preventing Dementia with Plants.
Oh.
And I will bring up this recording there because it's so wonderful to see you and how vibrant you are. So please share 3 of your secrets for continuing to be such a vibrant intellect and wonderful mind and heart
Aw.
into your 70s.
Well, you're very kind. We'll start with the physical, and I think that's eating the rainbow, which is not mine, but oh my goodness, if you do it, you don't really have to worry about a whole lot more. You did mention protein, and it is true that people over 70 need a little bit more protein. But we all get so much of this stuff, even vegans, that it's not really a worry. I know Brenda Davis, the wonderful dietitian, is saying, you know, over 70, you want to get a little protein in every meal. So soy milk instead of almond milk, and, you know, just put some beans on your salad, you know, whatever it is, get some kind of concentrated protein at every meal. So I do that too. But I think the real healer are like Dr. Furman's greens. What does he call them? G bombs: greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, um,
Berries.
berries, and seeds. Yeah.
There you
So,
go.
And it's so easy to just follow a guideline like that. So that's kind of where it is with the food, you know, real food that's really pretty. And then the second thing I think is just having something to get up for, having something that's important to you. And one of the great things about being older is we do tend to be less judgmental about everything. So one person's thing that gets them up in the morning might be working for world peace, and another person's thing might be growing a flower garden. And we could say, oh, well, that's kind of small compared to world peace. No, it's perfect. It's just perfect. Whatever is giving you the enthusiasm to be in life is just going to help so much. And that's what that's giving ourselves these messages that we're still here and we're still vital. And that brings us to number 3. And that one is going to be about exercise. And this can include yoga asana, it can include walking, whatever, dancing, swimming, whatever it is that makes you happy, and certainly some weights to build bone strength. But you want to be moving, not just for all the reasons we've always heard. We've always heard, of course, because the aerobic kind strengthens your heart, and the weight kind gives you stronger muscles and it gives you stronger bones. And then you need to be flexible so that you won't fall and hurt yourself and all that. Yes, yes, all true. But we've heard that so much, it's not very motivational. Here's something that is, and this is not from me. It's actually from a wonderful book called Younger Next Year, not a vegetarian book. Skip the part about food, but the part about exercise is tremendous. It's written by a medical doctor and a master's level skier. And what the medical doctor explains in this book is a little bit of evolutionary biology. And that is that in prehistoric times, a great many people did not make it through the winter. So people would go in the caves and huddle, and there was no food. And a few of the really strong ones would come out in the spring, and others would not. So the message that was coming through the brain and all the cells of the body was, this person is on their way out. So you may as well not mount an immune response or secrete some helpful hormone. It's a waste. And what's so interesting is that nowadays, if we're sitting on the couch, even just eating to beat the band, that same message of, oh, lethargy, that person is dying, don't do anything for them, don't help. Well, good Lord, we need the help. So exercise. And I don't like it, in all honesty, a whole lot more now than I ever did. Yoga is a little bit different because you really do get to bring your soul, and it's very engaging to me anyway. And I like some of these kind of adventure kinds of exercise, gyrotonics, aerial yoga, things that are just a tiny bit dangerous. So
Fun.
you have to be focused. But whatever it is that you'll do, even if you're not thrilled with it till it's over, is absolutely, absolutely vital. So eat the rainbow, have something to live for, and move your body.
Yes. I would add to that, and it's probably in your something to live for, but I love the part where you challenge yourself a little bit. And Victoria Moran is also a movie producer now. And not only you've worked previously on a documentary, Prayer for Compassion, but you are moving into fiction and a feature film. I'm super excited. I want to hear about Miss Liberty. Tell me something about it.
Well, Miss Liberty is the most beautiful screenplay, and I can say that because it is my husband's creation. And I'm called co-screenwriter because I've been through the 73 rewrites, but it's really his vision. And had we known early on how difficult this would be, we never would have started. I mean, we have been really, we've been through so much with this movie. So about 3 years ago, we just decided, you know what, we can't do this. It's just let it go. And then we got a donation earmarked for Miss Liberty. And it must have been a weak moment. And I thought, let's give it one more try. So we've been working really hard on it for the past couple of years. And there is a website, MissLibertyTheMovie.com, and the Miss is spelled out MISS. And you can read more about it there, but I'll tell you a little bit of the story here. There's a woman going to work in New York City. She's on the Staten Island ferry, and she's carrying a briefcase and a bunch of papers, and she does not look happy to be going to work. Neither do most of the other people. And then we see a cattle truck out in the Midwest somewhere, and there are these very frightened cows that really, really don't want to be going where they're going. And we're back to the woman on the ferry, and we see the Statue of Liberty. And then we see the cattle truck has a little fender bender at the slaughterhouse. The cows disperse, they're all rounded up again, except one of them escapes. She winds up in the yard of a computer tech who's owed money by the slaughterhouse. And this begins this wonderful human drama, fabulous surprise ending. And it's a tremendous story. And I was talking to someone last week who said, it's really good, but I just don't see how you're going to get the money. And frankly, I don't either. And I don't know if this will happen or not. And I do pray for the clarity that if it really is not possible, I'll stop, because we put a lot into it. But if it is possible, if somehow it is possible, I believe that it will do more for animals than anything I've done in my 55 years of animal advocacy. So that's why we're at it. We have 3 really cool actors who have expressed interest. They're not officially attached, but they've expressed interest. And if you go to the website, there's a wonderful video from one of those actors and 3 wonderful people in our movement. So, it could be coming to a theater near you or a streaming service or something in the next 3 or 4 years. Wrap us in some light. We can use it. Miss Liberty.
I have goosebumps again. This is my goosebumps episode. I love this. I'm seeing the movie in my head.
Oh, thank you.
I can see millions of people watching it on Netflix. I'd like it to be on Netflix. It's been a
I'd like
a
that
good spot.
too.
And it's the movie, right?
Yeah.
The plight of dairy cows has been where I started as a vegan. I came to plant-based for environmental reasons, but it was as a breastfeeding mother that I mean, I knew about all the facts before, but it was when I was actually breastfeeding for the second time in my life that I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I always have had this connection with the suffering of dairy cows. And I so hope that Miss Liberty makes it not just out of the slaughterhouse, but into the theaters.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm going to hold that vision with you. We've got some good people. We've got some good people. We just need some good people with, number 1, a great interest in this project, and number 2, a lot of money. We'll take that combination.
Let's keep on working on that. I want to ask you, as way to get closer to a conclusion here. There's many people, I'm called the Vegan Family Kitchen, right? But most of my clients are not vegan. And most people I work with are not vegan, and they're not families either. Or they maybe have grown children. I've found myself working with many people your age, plus or minus 15 years in the last few years. And I want you to talk to them and to give them your top word of wisdom if they're exploring this, maybe encountering challenges or frustrations. What's your message to them to encourage them to just keep going?
Yeah, well, it's very acultural. I've been around it for so long that most of the people that I know are vegan, and those that aren't pretend like they are when they're around me. So I don't have the difficulties that most people do of being the only vegan in their family or their company or their town. And it's not easy. So I think it's one of these wonderful things to think, ooh, this is a real good way for me to build my character. I'm going to do what is right for me and let other people do what they perceive to be right for them. And I know that if you're in this for the ethics, you really want to be telling people about that. But it seems like the best way to do it is just do it. Just shine your light. Just, oh yeah, my cholesterol went down another 40 points. That's going to get people to perk up because they don't want to be on Lipitor. And, blood pressure, all these things, I think, especially in the older age group, everybody's on medication, everybody's sick. And if there's a way to not be doing that or not be doing so much of it, that's very appealing. And when people ask, something I learned a long time ago that I think is really helpful is to just not tell people very much. And of course, especially when we're new vegans, we want to tell them everything. But sometimes it's wise if somebody says, oh, come on, just have one. It's like, no, thank you. I'd rather have my integrity. Because people don't look at it that way. People think of everything that we do that has to do with food as some kind of diet. The idea that food choices can go beyond, well, my friend is gluten-free and my other friend's keto and my other friend is eating everything since she started taking Ozempic. I mean, and then my friend is vegan. No, the friend that's vegan is not like those other people because there's another dimension to this. I remember this guy when people would ask him, well, like, what's wrong with eating meat? And he'd say, I don't know that there's really anything wrong with it. Well, you don't do it, do you? Not very often. Well, how long's it been? 23 years. And then people, they just want to know, they want to know. Where if we're pushing it, they don't want to know. So I think, and the other thing is just to be so educated, just have every app and every documentary and every book. And really, I mean, I always tell this to my Main Street Vegan Academy people. They're being certified as vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. And there are some required books to read for the course, but I give them a list that's 3 pages long. And they don't have to do that for me, but to take from personal areas of interest and really become an expert in that. And like, who are you talking to? Are you talking to young people? Are you talking to older people? Are you talking to people at church or people at work? Are you talking to people that care about the environment or people that think climate change is a hoax? You got to know who you're talking to. But once you're really, really educated, then you can pull out your facts and customize them. You're always in the fact truth area. We're not going to change
Bend the truth.
Talking to, but you want to talk in a way that people will accept, and you also want to really celebrate what other people do. Somebody who says, I bought some of that coconut milk is not the time to say, oh, shucks, I wish it wasn't coconut, because coconut is high in saturated fat. It's one of the few plant foods that is. So maybe next time you can try something. No, you just go, that is so great. That is wonderful. I'll bet your coffee is so much better in the morning. We've got to just know that we're not the only vegan in the world, and we're going to shine our light the way we do. And that person is going to hear or read or see online something from somebody else. We don't have to do it all ourselves. We just have to take it a day at a time and choose plants because they're pretty and they will make us pretty and they will make us healthy. And they'll also do a whole lot for your soul. That ahimsa thing is just as powerful as can be. That's why yoga made it the first moral precept. Ahimsa, do no harm, do no violence, don't support anybody else in doing violence. And if you can't do all the other many, many things that we're told, you go online and you look up positive things to do in the morning. There are probably 18 million of them, but if you can just know, I'm a peacemaker. I live to create and vibrate and radiate peace, and that cycles back, and you get it for your body, mind, and spirit.
Thank you, Victoria. And I want everyone to read your beautiful new book, Aging Like a Yogi, when it comes out.
And
So
may I
is it
share
ready for
something?
pre-order? Yes.
Yeah, it's
Tell me all about it.
Age Like a Yogi, A Heavenly Path to a Dazzling Third Act is available for pre-order everywhere. And if you pre-order, there are perks. So one of the perks that I think anybody that knows this wonderful host would be interested in is the Age Like a Yogi e-cookbook. So
What?
there are
That's
no
so awesome.
recipes in the book, but there's an e-cookbook that you will get if you pre-order. And
Fun.
also, you are invited to an exclusive webinar on January 12th, which is just a few days before the book is published. It's going to be all day. And if you're not available that Saturday, it'll be recorded and you'll get your copy. So if you want to be in on those perks and other ones that we come up with, because we're still building the package, all you have to do is send your receipt from the online or brick and mortar bookseller to assist, ASSIST, at victoriamoran.com. And my lovely French Canadian virtual assistant will see that you're on the list. So thank you. Thanks for taking a look at it anyway.
It's, if for no other reason, I think somebody would want to buy the book, Age Like a Yogi, because it gives them a little part of you. You know, I feel that it's so, and even if there was nothing in the book, the idea of supporting your work makes me just so enthusiastic. And I'm sure that people listening will feel the same today, because it's been such an inspiring conversation. And I will put obviously all of those things in the show notes, so no panic if you missed it. And I cannot wait to have you again on the show to talk about your 15th book, or maybe your 20th book. And we will certainly connect again. Victoria, thank you so much for everything you do and for being here today.
Thank you so very much. It was so much fun.